Time for a closer look at this morning's front pages now. With me to review the papers are the articles columnist Ali Miraj and the anthropologist Mariana Hotter. So very good morning to both of you. And I know it's a little early to say Happy New Year, but I'm going to do it anyway. Nice to see you both. So this hour, we're going to crack through a few of the front pages on this morning's papers. And Ali, you picked out the first one. You've gone with the Mail's front page, which actually, to be fair, a number of the papers go with, don't they? And this is the change in policy on arrivals from China.
Well, this is because China has abandoned its zero COVID strategy in recent days, and what you've seen is a massive spike in infections. I mean, we're led to believe that over 1 million people could be infected, but we're just unclear about what the data actually is. And I think this is a very sensible approach from the government. It has been criticised in some quarters, saying that, why are we doing this? This is a creeping return to lockdowns and to restrictions on travel. Well, frankly, it wasn't so many months ago that we were always being asked for our vaccination status wherever we travelled. So I don't think it's a big imposition at all. What the government is calling for is pre-flight tests to be done or vaccination status to be shown. Spain, they're actually requiring people from China to have on-arrival testing. So we're not alone. France has done the same thing. The US and Japan are also imposing restrictions. So I think until you've got confidence in the data coming out of China and also in the fact that there are no new variants coming out, I think it's a very sensible approach, because the last thing we want to do, given where the economy is right now and all the health conditions and issues we've had with lockdowns in the past and excess deaths, the last thing we want is another variant completely crippling our economy and society.
Ali, there is some criticism, though, isn't there? Some people say that travel bans actually make no difference. They might buy you a little bit of time, but ultimately, if there are new variants, we don't know if that is the case here, they will spread around the world eventually anyway.
Eventually they will, but it's a question of delay. And also, I don't really buy this argument that travel bans make no difference, because they patently do make some difference, which is exactly why China itself, if you wanted to go to China, you had the most draconian measures taken with quarantining before you could even enter the country. So it clearly has some impact. And it's just common sense that if you actually are restricting people or asking for pre-flight vaccinations to be or testing to be done, that will mitigate your risk of importing new variants or spread of infection. It's quite commonsensical, I would have thought.
And Marianne, the effects of COVID also make the front page of the Times, don't they? They do have this travel story, but their main story focuses on the impact the pandemic could have had on people with heart problems. Talk us through what the Times is saying.
Yeah, so this is Professor Chris Whitty, the Chief Health Scientific Advisor for the government, coming out. He was the guy, standing at a podium throughout the pandemic, advising on the scientific basis for the lockdowns, for the protocols, and he's come out saying that basically we're now in a period of prolonged excess deaths. Now, an excess death is a number of people dying that sit above a 5-year average. And at the moment, they're using a 5-year average that excludes 2020 because the pandemic not only affected death rates in such an extraordinary way, but also affected the data. So it's unreliable and slightly squiffy data. So that's been thrown out. But across the 5-year average, we're now seeing excess deaths. Around 800 more people per week in the UK are dying. Only half of those are perceptibly due to COVID, either a direct COVID infection or in the short term afterwards, or because of complications due to long COVID, something like that. The rest of those deaths are because Chris Whitty picks out specifically because of lack of access to secondary preventative healthcare. So things like people going to their doctor, finding out that they have high blood pressure and being prescribed medications and help with lifestyle changes that will help support them not getting ill, or being given something like statins or blood pressure medication that will actually directly address the condition, so that you're not then more at risk of things like a heart attack, a stroke, or the extended ill health behind something like heart disease. Now, if you look at the commentary around these news articles, you've got lots of people piling and going, well, what a hypocrite he is. He said he was the guy who told us all to keep away from the NHS and now, and stay at home, and that lockdowns were important. And now look at him, he's saying that it's caused deaths. Well, I could have told you that in 2020. That's kind of missing the point. Chris Whitty and the scientists, the researchers, the data analysts working on COVID always said there was going to be an impact. And of course, we've got this public inquiry to work out what's the best outcome, how to navigate these very difficult, very dynamic waters, perhaps in the future. As Ali points out, COVID hasn't gone away, and it's just one of many potential viruses that could cause world pandemic conditions. We need to work out how we manage long-term health, particularly with an increasingly aging population, particularly with an increasingly stressed NHS, but also address those really acute challenges like COVID was in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, and learn those lessons urgently, yeah. Let's move on to the Daily Express, Ali, shall we? And quite a shocking story this that they've got on their front page, that some of the figures about people who have been freed from jail or have escaped from jail before their time.
This is absolutely, utterly bizarre. I mean, exactly as you say, Anna. I mean, the Daily Express here is reporting that there have been 700 criminals in the past decade that have either escaped or been released in error, inverted commas, into society. And what you've had here is, at least in one case, a sexual predator has committed an offence on a 16-year-old and committed another sexual offence on someone else. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous. It reduces faith in the criminal justice system, and it puts in additional pressure on a government that is already facing problems across the public sector. And it gives a sense of this impending view that Britain simply isn't working at the moment. And this comes in a week when you've heard the Justice Secretary of the Shadow Justice Secretary from the Labour side, Steve Reed, talking about Labour's plans to look at the criminal justice system to give victims of crime more power over the kind of punishments that are meted out to people who commit crime. Whether that's actually going to solve the issue or not is by the by, but it shows again that Labour now feel that it can win ground on law and order, which was a very traditionally strong Tory area, but the Conservative Party is completely and utterly failing. And it's difficult when you've been in power for 12 years to say that, oh, this is all someone else's problem. It patently isn't. And I think this is going to reduce public confidence in the criminal justice system and in the government. And that is a really difficult and detrimental at a time when we've got public sector strikes all over the place and things just don't seem to be working in the country. It's a really disturbing story. And this is on the back of, by the way, we heard the other day that Border Force staff that are stepping in, the army and civil servants stepping in, are apparently, it's been reported, waving people through in certain cases that would have been detained at the border if you had proper Border Force staff that were trained with the requisite authorities to detain people. So this is just a really bad look for a government at a very difficult time.
Well, yeah, really interesting to see what the Ministry of Justice says, particularly about the people that were mistakenly let go, because the numbers are high, aren't they? It's really interesting. And Marianne, let's take a look at the front page of the Financial Times as well. Inevitably, this weekend, we're going to get a lot of reflection on the year just gone by. FT inevitably looking at what's happened on the markets. We don't have a huge amount of time, but talk us through what they're saying.
Okay, so the headline is that across the world, markets have lost more than $30 trillion worth of value in 2022. So the big headline losses, the US tech stock bonds, so companies like Tesla, Meta, Apple, Microsoft, overall they've lost 32.5% of their value. Tesla lost a third of its value in 2022. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, 64% of value. But also things like bonds, so the borrowing against the government, that's down 16%. And the FT sort of says this is the end of the cheap money era because in Ukraine, rising interest rates, which brings, as they say, peril and opportunity.
Yes, indeed. And of course, when shares go down, people's pensions can be affected as well, can't they? So there's lots of implications for lots of people. We're out of time. We will see you both again and now. Thanks very much indeed. you.